So joining us on the technology panel today, we'll have Doug Brown of IGEL, he's the VP of the community there, Jarion Gibson, who you just heard from, Jason Samuel, who is a solutions architect here at Alchemy, and then I'll be the MC of this event. So let's go ahead and dive right in. Actually, let me confirm everyone's on. There we go. Doug's coming in. Jason, we'll wait for you to light up, then we'll get going. So first and foremost, appreciate you guys making time and breaking away from your orgs to support us in this Solutions Summit. Better together story for our customers and taking information back to their environments to act upon was the goal here. So let's dive right into some of the Q&A. The EUC scene at large is typically saddled with a lot of technology debt. We've talked about a lot of conversations today around the modern workspace. The preconceived expectations, traditional deployment methodologies, all these different things that surround EUC at large. As we move forward, what type of considerations should sysadmins, decision makers, and technology leaders at large be thinking about, and how should the mindset change around delivering some of these modern workspaces?
Yeah, I guess so. One of the big thing here for modern workspace is to be able to see is, one, what's the pathway into it? Is it easy adoption? How is that going to change from what they're doing today? What they're going to have to do to get into the modern workspace? And also, too, a lot of everything's steering towards multi-cloud. So we're not always putting everything into a single cloud, but is it going to support multi-cloud? That way, you're covered from not only failing within your own environment, but also if there's an issue in public cloud where you can deploy things to multiple cloud vendors.
Jason, I'll bring you into that one. Paradigm shift wise, how should these decision makers and sysadmins and architects be fundamentally changing the approach around a modern workspace delivery?
Yeah, sure, Jarel. So one of the things that you really have to look at is, take an inventory of your current environment and see which pieces are just really kind of being the anchor in your environment, things that are kind of holding you back from modern workspace, and being able to take that hybrid cloud or multi-cloud strategy that Jarion just mentioned, and then concentrate on how to move those into some of your newer investments that may actually be able to take over on that particular piece, or otherwise just figure out what that particular vendor has that is more modern and can actually fit in better into your total encompassing workspace.
Okay, perfect. And when you look at EUC at large, we focused on login performance. We've focused on user adoption and different KPIs over the trajectory of kind of where we've come in the landscape of traditional deployment methodologies of locally installed apps to now cloud paging solutions, hybrid multi-cloud, and virtualization technologies. What are some of the newer KPIs that, from your seat, organizations should be considering as they kind of approach this new remote delivery concept? What are those KPIs that you would encourage administrators, decision makers, and the IT leaders on the call to consider? Let's start with you, Jarion.
So one of the big ones for me, especially as we're taking things out from not our data center, but to everywhere. So things like SaaS apps, you have to look at, we talked about uptime. We also look at the performance of the application itself, where the data lives. So if we're having data in one location and application in another, so as we're spreading things out, making sure that things are as close as possible so they have the best user experience as far as how the interaction with the application works. I think those are the some things we look at. Other ones are going to be, network is going to be a big one today, with everyone doing things spread out now, being remote, looking at it from a network standpoint. Is everyone's network connections good? Like we're having, Doug right now is having issues. So right there is, do we have that experience where we can function if there are any kind of issues with the network between point A and point B in that connection?
Completely agree. And a lot of the considerations we've been educating customers on is the shift from private circuits to public circuits, right? Or your DIA, your internet bound connectivity, egress and ingress points. So when you look at traditional QoS concepts, everyone's focused on that site-to-site connectivity from user to data center. But to your point, now that you've adopted and moved things to SaaS providers or clouds, the public internet all of a sudden becomes more of a focus. So resiliency, availability, and capacity of that circuit is definitely more pronounced than it ever has been. And when you look at the YouTube user down the hall from a critical business application, that's way more impactful than it once was. So I completely agree. Samuel, your side, from a KPI perspective, what are some of the areas where you would encourage people to focus?
Sure, absolutely. So in EUC, we've always looked at log-on times as being our measure for end-user computing, how well our environment is doing. But over time, we started to see, other KPIs, and that's the aforementioned ones that you had brought up. Now, in this situation where we've got workloads in a data center and workloads possibly bursting into a cloud, what some folks don't realize is that if you got a VM running in the cloud, those resources you're still wanting to talk to on-prem, those can become a bottleneck very quickly, even with things like ExpressRoute or site-to-site VPN or Direct Connect or whatever it is you're using for that VM to data center connectivity. There's that latency that can be introduced there. There can be additional hops. There could be things in your data center, things like proxies and SSL decryption technologies, different types of appliances that are in play between that VM and that database or app that you're trying to access. So understanding that and being able to monitor that and that latency, that's very critical now. The other piece is more end user facing, and it's around the security, because right now everybody's just very distributed, and understanding your policies around your modern workspace and like session policies, for example, how data is leaking out of your organization. I mean, are you blocking copy and paste functionality of your clipboard? Are you using any type of anti-keylogger or anti-screenshot type technology, some of the newer things that Citrix has introduced? These things are coming into conversations more and more these days, because a lot of organizations are now adopting this as kind of their go forward, and for the next year possibly, where all their users are distributed, and now data is being used basically from anywhere on any device, like we've been trying to do for 10 years in the UC. But the question is, now, can we make sure the data is actually secure and stays within the organization's control?
Absolutely, great point. And Doug, from your seat, before we dispatch the Geek Squad?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add on the KPI question. I think that both Jarion and Jason sort of said it just perfectly. I agree with everything they said on that one.
Okay, perfect.
I don't look at
perfect.
Yeah, I look at it a little bit different. So.
No worries. So what we saw as a part of the pandemic response and some of these remote work styles in our own customer install base was a lot of exploitation of cloud and Jarion, to your point, the hybrid and multi-cloud. What are some of the benefits outside of just the elasticity and scale out that you're seeing customers realize by adopting that hybrid approach? And Jason, I'll come to you next. So Jarion, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so the one thing here is with everything going on right now in the world and seeing them shift to say we have to have resources somewhere. One of the benefits is it's testing some of their business continuity plans. So you think about it, we're not doing the traditional everyone's in the office right now. We're not putting everyone in seats. What we're doing is saying, hey, you're having to work from home, and so we're having to change that our thinking of always having people in the office to be productive. And so in some cases, we're seeing people seem more productive because of that, but it's also testing part of our business continuity, because usually things like those type of situations are only tested maybe every 6 months, once a year, to where now it's kind of a full-fledged, we have to get users working from home. If we don't have the capability, we're bursting into the cloud, we're using other resources. So it's putting that to light. But I think one outcome of this too as well that we're seeing with the shift is that being in the office is not always the best thing and maybe not being needed as much going forward. It's really going to change how everyone works going forward with this current situation that's going on, because they're now adopting different work strategies, flexible hours, those type of scenarios. So I don't really see that they may not all go away, but there's going to be a shift from the brick and mortar offices to being more flexible where we work and how we work.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely going to see a commercial real estate shift of some sort. We're already kind of seeing that in our customer base now, and I only see that more activity is going to follow. Jason, from a multi-cloud perspective, I know you've been hands-on with a few of our customers on that path. Some of the added benefits that you're seeing there in production environments.
Yep, absolutely. So one of the things I've seen is that companies are starting to realize that disaster recovery, that whole strategy is kind of outdated. If you're still trying to do DR, that's not a good idea, because you can't do an active data center here and a passive data center B or a colo over here and expect that to cover you. It's more about business continuity. It's being agile and being able to respond to any situation, whether it be caused by a disaster or a pandemic, or somebody knocking out a generator down the street, or whatever it is, or just simply being able to flexibly put a workload where the user is close to it. So people are starting to understand that hybrid cloud is absolutely the strategy you should have to kind of solve for this problem. And then multi-cloud, obviously, IaaS is really becoming a commodity across the clouds. So you could put the workloads anywhere. Really, the uniqueness of the different clouds is around the platform as a service that they offer. There's some vendors that I would say, some cloud vendors that do certain things a little bit better than others. So there's some overlap in a few of them. But I would say, as far as IaaS, infrastructure as a service, you can stick it anywhere, whatever fits best for that particular situation. And so I think a lot of organizations are waking up to that, understanding that, and fully embracing it.
Yeah. One of the other ones I'll just add to it is something I'm firsthand knowledgeable of, is the cost pressures, right? So when you look at a traditional technology adoption, you have to budget and adopt based on a forecasted potential, right? If we're going to roll out DDI to 250 users, we buy a set of hardware or a stack that is suitable to accommodate that workload and hope that the adoption reaches that. Otherwise, we have an unrealized investment there, where these hybrid multi-clouds, Jarion, to the point you brought up earlier, allow you to kind of incrementally adopt and then scale out and scale up, as whether you're working through security, compliance issues from a cloud adoption perspective, or just proof of value, right? So without having to sink cost into an investment and actually being able to trial it. So more targeted conversation, and this came as a pre-registration conversation literally for every single one of you. WVD, it's the most talked about acronym right now in the EUC space. Wanted to get your perspective, since you guys have been around for quite a while in this space. The viability of that platform, questions range from feature set parity to the other players such as Horizon and CVAD. So Samuel, I'll start with you. Overall industry perspective on WVD and its maturity right now in the greater landscape of production viability.
Yep, from a production viability, or just to level set with folks that might be unfamiliar with the technology, WVD is really an evolution of RDS. It's a control plane that essentially runs in Azure, and it's very similar at first glance when you look at it from an architectural perspective compared to CVAD Service or Horizon Cloud. But the reality is, it's a very young product. It's very early in its life cycle, so the feature parity is not exactly the same as let's say CVAD Service or Horizon Cloud or any of those other technologies. However, Microsoft is working very closely with Citrix and VMware to actually extend the WVD solution. So I would say, definitely do your research, understand how that extension happens, and definitely, leverage a lot of the skill sets and a lot of the investments that you have in your current vendors to build your modern workspace, and then definitely take advantage of the some of the capabilities that WVD offers. The biggest one being Windows 10 multi-session, which is hands down, I would say, better than Server 2019 as a multi-session platform, just because it's just an OS that's in the image gallery. You just go pull it down. It's already optimized. It's got O365 built in. It's got all the things that you need to get quickly running with the density that you'd expect from multi-session VM.
Awesome, great. Doug, I know IGEL has done a strong alliance there with Microsoft on the WVD track. So from your industry expertise, or even from a company perspective, the viability of WVD and just your thoughts on it at large.
You got it. Let's see if I can get through this answer before my connection drops. WVD surprised me. So I've been a big fan of it. I followed Microsoft for, since day one. I think it's great what they're doing. But I thought when WVD was announced, and even RDMI or whatever they called it prior, I thought it would take a little bit of time, right? That the first version is sort of the beta. It's like TS 1.0, and it's like, okay, let's see what this is, and then let's sort of slowly move there. And then I went to Citrix Summit in January, and I walked around and chatted with a bunch of folks, a lot of you guys, a lot of my old friends that are engineers, senior engineers now, or IT managers, or own consulting companies. And what was really surprised me is that each and every one of these guys were completely on the WVD bandwagon. I mean, they were on it fully. And I said, are you excited about it, or are your customers excited about it? And they said, our customers are excited about it, which really blew me away. And then I come home from Summit, and what happens? Corona happens, right? Then we enter this, pandemic. And that was like the greatest gift to Microsoft in the entire, that they could ask for. Now we're forced to, or not forced, but this idea that we can move to the cloud, that it's already there. We don't have to build this infrastructure, right? Because we need the infrastructure yesterday. That pushed WVD even further. And then the idea that Microsoft itself can go and play their old game, which is basically, hey, we can take something, great or good enough, put it into our offerings and sell it for, and not even sell it. Customers don't have to buy WVD; they get it with their previous subscriptions. So why would you not use WVD, right? I mean, there's many reasons why. We can go talk hours from that, but it definitely plays into the WVD is here to stay, and it's going to be a big thing. And in the future, and today we develop on-prem in a data center, right? You have but most of us aren't sitting in front of our servers. We're actually doing that remotely. And tomorrow that'll be done in the cloud. But yet we as admins, as engineers, will do it the same way. It'll just be sitting in WVD, right? It definitely changes everything. Absolutely. And Corona helped that a lot.
Absolutely. We definitely saw a boost there. And Jarion, your take on it?
I think it definitely is going in the right direction for Microsoft. They had to do something to get past the old version, remote app, or whatever it was called. The previous version shot at this. They had to do something to make that more cloud and make it more modernized. And so they did that. Now, for some, it'll be good enough. It is attractive from you pretty much already, kind of already own it. You're just paying for the cloud consumption cost. My question is, what are they going to do next? Because right now they're kind of locking you into Azure for this, or if you want to do on-prem, possibly in the future at some time, Azure Stack, HCI, whatever they name it for, it's called. My question is that we've seen some cloud outages from Microsoft. So are they going to open this up to a more multi-cloud strategy? Maybe charge an extra premium for that and allow, that to be extended there. So like I said, I think it'll be good enough for some. And for those it's not good enough for, who are buying into Microsoft and buying into Azure, you're seeing what Citrix is doing, to where they're being able to, just like with RDS and RDSH on-prem, they're being able to put software on top of that and extend it for those who need extra functionality. But my biggest thing is, what's Microsoft going to do next as far as a multi-cloud strategy with this?
Absolutely. Great point. And you each touched on a point about cost pressure and it being included with the licensing SKUs. So as we look at kind of the forward, we obviously know economically what's going on in the nation. I wanted to get your take, Jarion, from a Nutanix perspective. We are obviously a partner in the line there. We know there's some cost considerations with migrating to those type of platforms. So while we're on that conversation, from your seat, what are some of the advantages of the Nutanix portfolio that could potentially have some cost avoidance or some cost offset upside? I mean, obviously the HP story is one of those that's compelling, but from that standpoint, what are some cost associated considerations when thinking about Nutanix?
I think the first thing is kind of your bundle. What do you get in the software and how you can license the software? Are there different ways so you can compare those costs to license it to help better fit your needs and your budget is one thing. Like we have a couple different models for capacity-based licensing or our new VDI core licensing. That's a little bit different, and based on what you're doing, you can compare and contrast those to see what's the best model. The other piece there is knowing kind of your cost per desktop, what you can do there to see, what your actual cost per desktop. And some of the tools that we have, like Beam, to where you can compare cloud costs, get a report, and compare that across clouds and also on-prem AHV to see, okay, what's the best, cost I'm going to get to where I can run my workload based on the other clouds, and get recommendations on that. Another thing too is like, when you're looking at cloud, how easy it is to get in and get out, right? Are you kind of painting yourself into a corner, or can you migrate between clouds easily? And that's where we have tools like our Move tool. But also, one thing I'm liking is clusters, because no matter where you be able to run clusters, once we have multiple clouds, it's the same AHV software. So if you don't want to be in AWS and later on want to go to Azure or the next one we support, you can easily move that without much work, and not being able to spend a lot of man hours moving between clouds.
Great point. And Doug, from an IGEL perspective, we've done a couple of ROI analysis for our customers around the platform. What are some of the cost benefits of the IGEL platform for those facing these cost pressures in today's economic climate?
You got it. I think the IGEL platform is perfect for that. At the end of the day, we're really a modern operating system. We like to call it an edge modern OS, or edge OS, right? That addresses a bunch of different things. One, it's centrally managed. We can manage, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of devices through one interface with basically one admin. You don't need all these different tools on the back end. We can patch, we can update, all from that same infrastructure, right? We don't need a bunch of tools to do that. It's secure out of the box, right? We don't need a bunch of tools to make it secure, right? And at the end, we're able to, again, update that anywhere, any place, anytime. So at the end of the day, if you look at managing an endpoint in today's world, you have 10 or 20 or 100 different tools you're using. With IGEL, you don't have that problem. You get to delete and remove all those tools from managing your endpoint. And at the end of the day, if you're using a solution like Citrix, for example, VMware, Microsoft, WVD, well, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get to a remote application, remote desktop. Why in the world would you have a traditional computer design, 25 years ago? I mean, just Monday was 25 years from Windows 95, right? And we're still using that. So when we talk about modern infrastructure, use a modern edge OS, and it solves and addresses all those. And it's quite inexpensive too.
Absolutely. So in that same vein, the other side of what has happened in 2020 is, security has remained in the forefront. And as we look at that across the EUC environment, capturing that wallet share with maybe partnering security teams has been an MO of ours for some of our customers, because it's a board level conversation, right? So Samuel, I'll start with you. From a concepts, feature set, and just overall paradigm shift, what are some of the security conversations you're seeing pop up in our customer environments to help gain traction for those EUC admins, decision makers, and architects?
Sure. So one of the big ones that I'm seeing is around the identity providers that hook into your EUC environment, especially these days when you might hire a new employee and they're being onboarded from the field. They're not actually coming in to an office to, grab a badge or a laptop and stuff like that. So how do you get them in securely? How can you, with high identity assurance, be able to say that is that person that is onboarding and setting up their MFA? So you need really a cloud identity provider that's robust enough to be able to hook into your EUC environment and be able to do that remote onboarding capability. The second thing is the fact that passwords are continually being phished and leaked out there, and it's just a constant problem. Passwordless is definitely here to stay. Pretty much every organization I talk to, they have some level of passwordless initiative. Either they're already far into it, or they're in the process of going that way, especially now, just because everything is very user-centric now. People are just distributed everywhere, and you don't know what type of things they have on their home network that could be capturing their password, or what their network is looking like. And it's just become one of those things where if you're not looking at this, if you're not looking at going passwordless for your EUC environment, it is a very large gap that you're leaving out there. A lot of organizations had to quickly move their EUC environments and kind of scale it up and get more users onto it just because of the situation. But that also kind of expanded the target for the environment. So this has become very critical. The second piece, and I kind of touched on this earlier, was about the data loss prevention. Now you got so many users that can, open up a virtual desktop and have wide open access to your environment. So you have to really think about network segmentation for your virtual desktop environment. What's critical, what's not, what's basic office productivity versus, hey, this is a very critical healthcare system or SCADA system or control system or something like that. And how do we do step-up authentication within the session? Just because a user got into a virtual desktop the first time and has been in there for 4 hours using it, when they do something that's highly critical or highly sensitive within that session, how do we double check and make sure that that person should be doing what they're doing? And can we have them step up and basically say, yeah, I am really who I say I am, just the second time around. So that's become kind of a conversation piece. And then Blake kind of also showed us earlier just the Citrix Analytics dashboard, just being able to see and capture that impossible traveler where, is the user bouncing all over the country to log in? That doesn't seem right. That was an extreme example. It doesn't happen a whole lot. But there are certain things where a user may copy over a bunch of stuff out of OneDrive and it just doesn't seem correct. Why would they be grabbing that much data out? And just to flag those things and respond to those, that's become very important.
Yeah, absolutely. The behavioral side is definitely where the frontier is. From an IGEL perspective, Doug, the security conversation is extremely relevant, either from your own perspective or from a product portfolio sake. What's the security conversation in your seat?
Can you guys hear me on this one? I think I just dropped again.
Yep, we can hear you perfectly.
Okay, perfect. It tells me I've dropped. So, you guys can discuss the back end. To us, it's about that front end, right? And we're able to secure all the traffic from our management traffic from the operating system to the back end. And at the same time, what we are is a Linux operating system. We're a read-only memory Linux operating system. So if we do get a virus, anything of that nature, all you have to do is reboot the thing, everything's gone, right? We do work with, over 100 integrations within our operating system, many of those security vendors, right? So if you're looking for, password, two-factor authentications, smart cards, any of that stuff, we support it out of the box, right? So at the end of the day, a lot of what and this was, my answer to the previous question, a lot of the issues you have with your traditional desktop go away when you use a solution like what IGEL brings to market.
Absolutely. And Jarion, the Nutanix platform, the security feature set there, or your own personal take on what the EUC environment's going through now?
Yeah, so the first thing, everything what Jason said was spot on. I completely agree with everything, the different things, the Citrix stack, making sure what's going on with data, users jumping around and that kind of stuff. And then Doug too, something happens on the endpoint, being able to just, reboot and, back to square one. From a Nutanix perspective, a couple of things I talked about in my presentation. One was files. One thing we have in files is a thing called files analytics. And so when Jason talked about data and data access and what users are doing and so forth, with files analytics, what you can do is look at anomaly detection, users patterns, that kind of stuff, and then create alerts based on that. And we're further improving that platform to be able to help with there's some kind of issue with a data breach or the way that data is being accessed or the way they're accessing the data. So that's files analytics has that. But also too, we also integrate with third-party partners for antivirus and protection and that kind of stuff too. So to further that, the second one is going to be Flow, which is kind of our micro-segmentation piece that I mentioned in as well, to be able to lock down the traffic, making sure that those those in-app or virtual apps VMs or virtual desktops VMs, the user accesses that they're only allowed to talk to what they're supposed to be talking to, and then be able to audit that and visualize that traffic as well. So we have two things in our stack there to help you with that. And then also just by extending out more to integrating with other third-party partners.
Awesome, great feedback. One of the other questions before we wrap up here with your final thoughts, we often get asked, and I appreciate your response because I think you guys are valued in the marketplace. from a industry expertise, and you've just been around and seen the cycles of technology. I always get asked skill sets. So if I'm trying to retool my team, if I'm trying to build in some career progression, what are some of the skill sets you would advise the normal EUC admin, architect, decision maker to be investing in at this point? Doug, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts there?
You got it. I think of two. One, coming to IGEL's been I went from, I'm a traditional Windows guy. I started with Windows in the 70s or with Microsoft in the 70s, over to Windows, all my skill set, and from the engineering side, from the Windows side, right? And then I walk into a Linux company. And as we've grown over the past 3.5, 4 years, it's been interesting to see we're not just getting the Linux guys, we're now getting a bunch of Microsoft guys in there. So definitely learn Linux. It is definitely the future, and you'll see it everywhere, every place. Many of the younger kids do, the older guys might not, right? So definitely Linux. The other thing I always tell everyone is business. And it's not something that a techie tends to want to learn or think about. But the more you can listen to the business conversations, understand why businesses do what they do, right? The better off you'll be. It's not just about ones and zeros. It's also about the bottom line and why companies do what they do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Jason, from your seat, skill sets that should be adopted or considered?
Sure. So in the EUC world, especially in large organizations where you may be siloed to doing just one thing, you're now having to wear multiple hats, or at least understand multiple hats, especially the security conversation. For example, Doug was just talking about IGEL, but a lot of the things that he was talking about also touched on security. And normally that would be somebody else's job, but now you have to be kind of cognizant of that, and it sometimes have to be the one that's leading the charge with certain technologies. So just constantly look at the landscape of your workspace and understand that security piece. That's very important. The second thing hiring managers are looking at are going to be things around hybrid cloud. A lot of organizations, may have a large footprint in data centers still, but that doesn't mean they're not using cloud. And that's kind of their approach toward everything now. Can we try it in the cloud and use it on a consumption-based model before we put a lot of investment into our data center, a lot of sunk cost? So, going forward, I think a lot of the EUC conversations are going to be very hybrid cloud oriented. So definitely, put that on your resume. Try, talk about the projects that you've done or the things you've done in your organization, because that is a highly valuable skill to have.
Okay. Jarion?
Yeah, I completely agree with both what Jason and Doug said. And Jason had a good point about you're wearing multiple hats. So one thing you're kind of seeing, especially in the EUC world, is kind of return of the generalist, because EUC touches so many things. You have to understand all the things that it touches, but also not understand them. But when it comes to a situation of troubleshooting, know what tools and how to go to the different teams to be able to say, look, I'm seeing this because of X, Y, and Z, and not to say, well, it's not my problem, and throw it over the fence. So I think being the generalist and be able to make sure not to get so laser focused on one thing is definitely a key skill to have. But the other two is going to be scripting, especially when you're getting to multiple cloud, hybrid cloud, automation, some kind of scripting, some kind of coding, to be able to say, you're not just wasting time, doing all the clicks and all the input, that you're actually able to automate things, to spin things up and do all the stuff for you while you're focusing more on design and architecture instead of implementation.
Absolutely. I was hoping one of you all said the automation piece. That's probably the number one activity we have in our pipeline now around whether it be infrastructure automation or robotic process automation. Everyone is attempting to do more with less, and if it's a rinse repeat type of process, why not automate it? And then when you talk about just ongoing administration, the value add there is tremendous. So I wanted to get a parting thought from each of you before we get into the raffle. So I'll start with you, Doug. If there's anything you would want the attendees to take away and go back to their enterprises and explore or experiment with, what would that guide point be?
Well, first and foremost, I definitely agree with the automation piece and the ability to write code. I just want to say that if you can, it's one of the skills we used to have when I started off, and then we lost, and now we're back to it, and that's a huge thing. And plus, it's a lot of fun. From the IGEL side, definitely check us out. You know, my job at IGEL is I run the IGEL community, and the IGEL community is all about techies, all about learning about IGEL, what we do, how we do it, being able to ask questions, a bunch of events like this. Head over to igelcommunity.com. Go ahead and join that community, and you'll see what we do, right? But first and foremost, try it out. And when you see it and when you try it, you're like, wait a second, I can't believe this. And after being with the company for 3.5 years, I still am amazed by things that somebody shows me that I didn't know we could do. So the best thing I can say from the IGEL perspective is give it a try. You'll be really impressed with what as I like to say, the Germans built. And then last but not least, I apologize for these troubles. This has been embarrassing to say the least. I'm sorry.
No worries. We got you covered. Jarion, parting thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to echo similar to Doug is, go over to Nutanix and check out our community as well. One of the things that I mentioned is Nutanix CE, which is Community Edition. So if you want to kind of get your hands in look and feel how AHV works, how our architecture works, be able to deploy the things I talked about, those all work on our Community Edition, and that can run on commodity hardware. So go out there and look at that. And then just think about, your strategy from being just private cloud to looking at, what can you do to make a hybrid cloud strategy and what you have today in your deployment, if that will work, or do you have to look and venture out to other products? So definitely trying to think about your hybrid cloud strategy, especially today with the current times we're in, because like I mentioned earlier, we're having to shift how our users are working, having to making sure that we have resources for them to work from wherever. So making sure that you have all those things in a row to make sure that your users can work properly and efficiently.
Perfect. Absolutely. Jason?
Yep, I would say learning, constantly learning. Right now, depending on what vertical you're in, what industry you're in, you could be looking at things from a cost perspective, or you could be looking at things from a user experience perspective, or you could be looking at things from a security perspective. I mean, there are different drivers right now, and how that impacts your workspace is really dependent on the technologies you're using. And some of it is going to be around, hey, can I switch out one piece here or add this other piece here? And a lot of the technologies that the attendees today have listened to may be the solution that they're going to use going forward. So definitely, even if you're not using these technologies that we spoke about today in your environment, you have to kind of always be learning and understanding how these pieces fit, because at some point in time in your organization, you will want to switch to one of these or expand on one of these solutions that you already have but aren't using the full capability of. So just always constantly be learning, keep attending these type of events. Admins, engineers, architects, this is how you get technical knowledge. Managers, decision makers, this is another way for you to kind of understand what's happening in the industry, what's happening across multiple verticals, not just your own, because a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve are very common now among, especially in this, age where a lot of it's around remote work, obviously, our bread and butter, and delivering this modern workspace.
Absolutely. We had one question that came in around scan remote user endpoint before they connect. So endpoint analysis scans, the EPA scans are possible. We see a number of technologies out there that can do that, Ray, and I'll respond to you offline if you want to get deeper into that conversation. But appreciate you submitting the question. So the Traeger, which is the grand prize, if you will.